Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to get into today's topic because we're cracking open a 4,500-year-old archaeological cold case. We're looking at the incredibly fascinating and, frankly, frustrating puzzle of the Indus Valley Script. Just imagine a highly advanced society leaving behind thousands of intricately carved artifacts, but keeping its deepest secrets completely locked away under 4.5 millennia of pure silence. It's a massive enigma, so let's look at the clues they left behind and see if we can decode this thing. Okay, let's dive into this. The central mystery here is wild. Around 4,000 years ago, an entire advanced civilization just vanished. They left behind thousands of carefully carved texts, but to this very day, we cannot read a single word, not one sentence. With Egyptian hieroglyphics or Mesopotamian cuneiform, we eventually cracked the code, but the Indus script, it remains stubbornly silent. Why is that? What's actually holding us back? Section 1, a city without a voice. To understand the script, we really need to look at the scene of the crime, the Harappan civilization. This society flourished between 2600 and 1900 BCE across a massive stretch of modern Pakistan and northwestern India. 5 million. That's the estimated peak population of the Indus Valley Civilization. To put that staggering number into perspective, that was a massive chunk of the entire global human population at the time. We aren't talking about some small, isolated, lost tribe here. This was literally the most populous civilization of its era, stretching across an area way larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. And this brilliantly illustrates why their silence is just so baffling. When you compare the Indus Valley to their contemporaries over in Egypt and Mesopotamia, the contrasts are huge. In Egypt, you've got monumental tombs, conquering kings, endless records of warfare. But the Indus Valley? They built a society on master urban planning. We're talking streets laid out in perfect grid patterns, multi-story brick buildings, and a super sophisticated sewage system with covered drains that Europe wouldn't even match for thousands of years. Plus, and this is the crazy part, there is virtually no evidence of warfare, no grand palaces celebrating military victories, just a highly organized, seemingly egalitarian society. And societies capable of that massive level of organization, they don't just abandon language, they record, they communicate. So why does their script refuse to speak to us? Moving to Section 2, Anatomy of a Cold Case. Let's look at the physical evidence archaeologists have actually dug up. We've got over 4,000 inscribed objects, pottery, tools, and of course those famous, beautiful soapstone seals. These seals feature anywhere from 400 to 700 distinct signs, carved right alongside these stunningly realistic animals, humped bulls, elephants, rhinos, and yeah, maybe even unicorns. But here is exactly where the investigation hits a massive brick wall. 5. That is the average number of symbols per inscription, just 5. Think about that for a second. The absolute longest text we have ever found is under 30 characters. Try to imagine learning the English language if every single book, sign, or document you ever found was only 5 letters long. Without length, context just totally collapses. So the roadblocks for cryptographers are, frankly, brutal. First, you've got that extreme brevity we just mentioned. Second, there is no Rosetta Stone. When scholars cracked Egyptian hieroglyphs, they had that ultimate cheat sheet, a single artifact with the exact same message written in Greek, which they knew, and hieroglyphs, which they didn't. For the Indus script, 0. Not a single bilingual or trilingual text has ever been found. And third, we don't even know what underlying language these symbols represent in the first place. Which brings us perfectly to Section 3. The language family theories. This is a huge focus for researchers. If these symbols actually encode a spoken language, who are the prime suspects? What ancient language families could they possibly be tied to? So the crucial point is that scholars fiercely debate 3 main linguistic suspects. The first is early Dravidian, suggesting the script is the ancient ancestor of languages still spoken in southern India today. The second proposes ties to Indo-Aryan, linking it to early forms of languages like Sanskrit that eventually shaped and dominated northern India. And the third is the isolated tongue theory. This is the kind of heartbreaking idea that this was a linguistic island, a completely unique language with absolutely no living descendants today, kind of like the Basque language in Europe. Let's look a little closer at that Dravidian theory, because it's considered by a ton of linguists to be a really strong leading candidate. Dravidian is a major language family primarily spoken in southern India right now. The idea that there might be a living, breathing linguistic link spanning 4,500 years is totally tantalizing. Researchers are even looking at the genetics of modern populations in ancient DNA to try and bridge that massive cultural gap across the millennia. But honestly, imagine trying to prove a family tree with a 4,500-year missing link. Without a bilingual text, proving whether it's definitively Dravidian, Indo-Aryan, or an isolated tongue remains just frustratingly out of reach. Because of these massive hurdles, some scholars took a serious step back. Section 4, is it even writing? What if we've been looking at this entirely wrong the whole time? I want you to consider a highly controversial theory that caused an absolute uproar in the academic world. What if these symbols don't represent spoken sentences at all? See, most linguists define true writing as a system that encodes the full range of human speech. It has flexible syntax, it can tell complex stories. But what if the Indus script is just proto-writing? In this view, the symbols are more like administrative codes, ownership marks, or even brand logos used to identify the origin of goods. We know for a fact these seals were used in a vast trading network stretching all the way to Mesopotamia. So were these really just ancient barcodes and religious tokens, rather than a system designed to write out full, complex language? But that proto-writing theory created its own set of problems. Section 5, AI and the final clues. To figure this out, researchers had to completely shift tactics. Enter modern computational forensics. Instead of trying to find out what the symbols mean, they started investigating how they behave. Using artificial intelligence and machine learning, researchers feed thousands of these inscriptions into algorithms. First, they track symbol frequency. Then they analyze structural position, figuring out which symbols appear almost exclusively at the beginning, or maybe at the end. Finally, they identify repetition and syntax rules to spot patterns totally invisible to the human eye. They aren't looking for meaning anymore. They're hunting for underlying structure. Now, what's really interesting about this data is the conclusion those AI models reached. It was absolutely groundbreaking. The script behaves exactly like organized communication. The computers proved these symbols do not just appear in some random order. There are distinct grammatical rules governing which symbols can follow others. Its statistical properties fall exactly where you'd expect for a linguistic writing system. Now, sure, it's not proof of translation, but it is incredibly powerful evidence of syntax. This wasn't just a random collection of logos, it was a highly structured, organized system of communication. And that leaves us with a pretty profound realization. History is not only lost through destruction, sometimes it is lost through unread words. The Indus Valley Civilization built massive cities that functioned better than medieval European towns. They established trade across thousands of miles and maintained a peaceful, complex society. Yet their deepest secrets remain totally hidden from us. It's humbling, right? It reminds us of the limits of our modern knowledge, but it also invites every new generation to try, just one more time, to hear the voices of our ancestors speaking across 4,500 years of silence. So what do you think they were trying to tell us? Keep that question in mind as you continue exploring this amazing mystery. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.